Hey, what is going on, World Civ students? It is Mr. Mori coming at you with day 2 of the German Unification. There might be a day 3 of the German Unification. I'm trying to spread it out so that there's not as much per day. Normally, in the actual school, I'd probably get through I'd get through the German Unification in 2 days and, like, really a day and a half. And I'd get through the Italian Unification in probably half a day. So, and I'd probably, in that time give more time on chapter 9 and 11, which is kind of what I'm doing as well. Each day is going to have less time spent on it, but you should be using that time with the smaller notes videos to be doing chapter 9 and 11. And if those, I don't think they should close anytime soon, but if they do, I'll reopen them. Looks like most of you did the French Revolution worksheet, so that's good. So make sure that you did the discussion questions from yesterday for the German Unification notes. Make sure you're writing things down. There was one slide yesterday where I was covering up some underlined words. Okay, you don't need to panic over 5 words. The Congress of Vienna puts in place a revised version of Napoleon's Confederation of the Rhineland, which replaced the Holy Roman Empire. It's okay. Use intuition, and I also read it out loud usually. But there you go. Okay. So this is a very important concept in the German Unification. Basically, whenever they had their meeting, which I'm blanking on the name of it, the Frankfurt Assembly, duh. Whenever they had the Frankfurt Assembly, they had 2 different plans for what Germany could look like. One was called Klein Deutschland, and one was called Gross Deutschland. Now, if you don't know this, in Germany they actually don't call it Germany; they call it Deutschland. Not to say that, not every country calls it what we call it. People in Brazil might not necessarily call it Brazil. I know they pronounce it differently. It's more like Brasil. But sometimes it is a completely different spelling, because Germany would be in the language of German. Germany is the English name for that country. So it makes sense. So Klein Deutschland, Gross Deutschland is really Deutschland with an added Klein or Gross. So to break down the meanings of those, Klein Deutschland was Prussia's plan for a united Germany, and that was a plan that did not include Austria. Because remember, the Prussians and a lot of the German states are Protestant, and Austria is Catholic. And I'm going to show you on the map here in a few minutes. Austria is a big country. It is much bigger than all the other German territories, and it was considered to be the most powerful. So Prussia wants to go with Klein Deutschland because that would make Prussia the dominant power, because they are the second most powerful nation of people that speak German. So when they have the Klein Deutschland plan, it is to make certain that Prussia has the most power, and because Austria is not included, and they're kind of hiding that behind a veil of, well, Protestantism. So it's not really a conflict based on Catholic versus Protestants, not really. It's really more Prussia versus Austria and them fighting for power over who is going to control this new united Germany. And Gross Deutschland is a larger Germany, right? And that is a Germany, a unified Germany that would include Austria, right? So an easy way to remember this is Klein, well, Calvin Klein underwear. You're walking in Walmart and you just happen upon that aisle that is the men's underwear section. Calvin Klein has female underwear now too, but that doesn't serve my purposes here. So you're walking in Walmart or Kroger or whoever sells Calvin Klein underwear, and you stumble upon that men's clothing aisle, and your eyes just happen to land on one of the packages. In the packaged whitey tighties, there's always a picture of a model, really probably between the belly button and the mid thigh area, of somebody wearing whitey tighties, and they always have a fake bulge because nobody wants to see that. They always have some kind of a cup or something to prevent any sort of revealing shape to come about. But my point is, whitey tighties are very small. They cover a very small portion of the body. So when you think of Klein Deutschland, what I want you to do is I want you to imagine a German, a skinny German like this guy up here in the corner, frolicking through a field of flowers in Germany while wearing Calvin Klein whitey tighties. And I am very confident that that is a visual that you will have a hard time forgetting. So I really want you for just a moment to imagine a German frolicking through the flowers singing about Wiener Schnitzel. And he's wearing Calvin Klein underwear. And if it helps you remember, you can imagine him having a small package. Now, small underwear, small package, small German guy, small Germany, Klein Deutschland. You're welcome. And then we have Gross Deutschland, which you can think of this guy down here, because gross doesn't just mean disgusting. Gross can also mean like gross product. So like a large number of something, or a big amount of something, a gross product, extra, right? So this guy down here is in a German World War II costume, and he is quite large. And so and of course it says, I smell Luftwaffes. So you can just imagine him. He's a larger German, larger Germany. And you're like, well, what the heck's a Luftwaffe? Well, that's just the name for the German Air Force in World War II. So it's kind of a funny joke, do I smell Luftwaffes? That German accent, wer are the waffles? Where are they? Where are the waffles? I want them for the fear. Right? So you have Klein Deutschland and Gross Deutschland. These are very big vocab words for this unit that you need to know. This is probably one of the most important slides in the PowerPoint, which is why it's all underlined. So you want to make sure that you get all of it. It's one of those parts of the notes that I specifically look to see that you have it down. I have my British tea because I'm allergic to coffee. So here's that map I was talking about. You can see Austria is quite large. It is quite large. And Prussia here in the dark teal is not near as large, and it's separated by other nations, including Hanover. So small Germany, Klein Deutschland, would be all that you see in this area, but not including Austria, which would result in a smaller Germany. Hence the Calvin Klein underwear example. Gross Deutschland would include Austria, which would mean that Germany would cover a significant chunk of Europe. But as you probably know, if you're really good with history, you probably know that they don't go with Gross Deutschland in the end. Now, the Frankfurt Assembly was meant to create a peaceful resolution to prevent these revolutions from getting out of hand. They're like, hey, we hear you. You don't need to have this extravagant revolution. And so they meet the Constitution of St. Paul's Church, which is what's underlined here. is the document that they come up with at the Frankfurt Assembly on April 4th, 1849. It offered the title of Kaiser, which is German for emperor, to the Prussian king Frederick Wilhelm IV. But he says no. He refuses. He could not accept the crown without the consent of the actual German states. And the Constitution of St. Paul's Church got him the permission of the delegates, but it wasn't necessarily the people of Germany that were electing him. And he's seen things like the French Revolution go down. He's seen, he's learned from history because he's a smart man and he pays attention in history class, and he knows that if he doesn't have the consent of the people, or if the people don't believe that he had the consent of the people, then he's going to have problems. He doesn't want to be Kaiser if that means that he's going to be maybe like beheaded in a guillotine or something like that. So he has those reasons to say no, and he also privately probably feared the opposition of other rivals and the military intervention of Austria and Russia. Over here we have the Prussian Black Eagle. It's a pretty cool sigil. I wish kind of that the eagle on the shield had another eagle on it, like right there, and that eagle had another eagle on it, so it was like an Inception sort of thing. But anyway, it is what it is. So, with nothing really accomplished, the German delegates return home, really again with nothing accomplished, because he refused. They spent all that time debating Kleindeutschland versus Großdeutschland. They offer the king of Prussia the title, and he says no. So with nothing really accomplished, the German delegates return home, and this sets the stage for the two European powers, being Prussia and Austria, to kind of have a bit of a power struggle. Who is the strongest leader of the German states? Is it Prussia? Is it Austria? We don't know yet. So in 1861, Prussia is led by King Wilhelm I, and he's going to put these people in his cabinet. And these are some very important names, especially this first one right here. And that is Otto von Bismarck, who is going to be the chancellor. And Bismarck is a huge, huge deal. Probably the name out of all of the German, patriots, I guess, like the founding fathers. He's probably the most important, Bismarck. Now, Helmuth von Moltke will also be important, but Bismarck is where it's at. All right, so we also have Albrecht von Roon, the Prussian Minister of War, and Moltke is the Chief of Prussian General Staff. Point is, he has a very impressive cabinet, if you will. These are a lot of very impressive men, and we have Bismarck right here. Bismarck, again, probably the most prominent of those men, and you definitely want to remember him. He's definitely a big deal. I don't know if you heard of him, but he's kind of a big deal. So King Wilhelm and von Roon reorganize the Prussian army, while Moltke redesigns the strategic defense of Prussia, specifically designed against Austria. And these four men will be the leaders of the unification of Germany, especially Bismarck, who again is on the left there. Now, something of note is the Prussian helmet. The Prussian helmet you can always identify because it has a spike on the end. And I also want to take this moment just to say, if you haven't already noticed, Prussia is not Russia. Yes, they're very similar in spelling. If you took away the P, it would be Russian. But Prussia is not Russia. Prussia is actually really what becomes Germany. So when I talk about Prussians or Prussia, I'm really talking about like the prequel to Germany. Prussia is really the one that becomes Germany. So do not think I'm talking about Russians here. They speak German, and they are probably the most German Germans there are. Even other Germans fear Prussians. because the Prussians are just known for being the most nationalistic, most cray-cray Germans there are. All right, so Bismarck gives this very famous speech called, the Blood and Iron speech, and there is going to be a worksheet on this. I'm not going to assign it today, but it'll probably be tomorrow that I assign it. But it is probably one of the most important speeches in German history. So he gives his speech on the 30th of September in 1862, at the time when he was Minister President of Prussia, and it's about the unification of the German territories. It's very nationalistic. It's very unifying. It's very popular. A lot of people really liked what he had to say because it was very nationalistic, and nationalism was such a powerful thing back then, which again is, extreme pride in your nation. So he gives this speech, which is very much so pro-German, we're better than, we're Germany, we're better than everybody else, and we need to have our own nation in order to show that. And that's not to say that Germany is evil in that, because every nation is like that. The British are like, oh yeah, we're better than everybody else. The French are like, oh yeah, we're better than everybody else. It's just part of nationalism. You see that even in America today. There is sort of an understanding, at least maybe not so much around Democrats, but certainly Republicans, and definitely when you go down to Texas, you notice that there is a certain pride that they are proud to be American. They are proud to be a part of this nation. It doesn't mean we're perfect, but you're proud to be American. The whole "Make America Great Again" thing. That is an example of nationalism, and a pretty brilliant marketing campaign, to be honest with you. But that to say that not all nationalism is bad, not all nationalism is good. It just depends on the severity of it. I think that Bismarck's level of nationalism isn't necessarily dangerous, but to an extent it is. But then you get to like Hitler's level of nationalism, and yes, that is very dangerous. But everybody has some level of nationalism. Nationalism is not evil in and of itself. Obama had nationalism. I have nationalism. I have an American flag hanging up behind my desk. We do the Pledge of Allegiance. That's all elements of nationalism. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Speeches would be categorized as a form of, you could say, propaganda. Whenever Bernie Sanders has one of his commercials or Donald Trump has one of his speeches, that is an event to try to boost loyalty and energy and excitement about a political movement, and that really is a form of propaganda. And again, not all propaganda is bad, not all of it's good. It just is what it is. So in his speech, he states that wars make nations, and you might disagree with him there, but he's actually right. New nations are really only formed through blood. And that is, I really can't tell you historically how true that is. I think probably, I don't think there's any nation that I can think of that was not made through blood. Even Switzerland was made after a war, and because of the results of a war, even though they're notoriously neutral, there's just, nations are made by war. It's just the way that it is. You look at China. Anytime China gets a new form of government, there's a lot of blood. I'm actually kind of curious to see, historically speaking, China always usually have these big government shifts whenever there's a lot of bloodshed and hardship. So I'm wondering if the coronavirus and everything going on with Hong Kong, if maybe that might spark some elements of rebellion in China. Be interesting to see. Unfortunately, millions of people will die if that happens. But there's already millions of people dying from the virus that the Chinese government, is largely responsible for. The second part of his speech was what we call realpolitik. And I used to show a Tom Ritchie video about this, and he would explain that really well. Basically, it just is essentially Machiavelli. There's that guy again that we talked about in the Renaissance. I told you he'd come up in various points. And that's basically just say to be realistic, to not see the world through a fluffy lens like, yay, everybody can have, $1 million and everyone's going to be happy and everything's going to be amazing and yeah. It's not possible. You got to be realistic to a certain extent. You can't be idealistic all the time or you're going to die. If you're idealistic all the time, you're going to be that nincompoop that goes down a dark alley in Chicago and thinks that everything's going to be fine because everybody's great. And you're going to get shot. It's kind of crazy because, Chicago has actually had a decrease in deaths because of the coronavirus. I think that just tells you how dangerous Chicago is. Chicago is the Gotham City of real life. It needs Batman. It really does. So where is he? I don't know. Where's Bruce Wayne? But my point is, being realistic is a big part of his speech, meaning like, hey, let's look at this realistically. Let's look at this practically. What is going to get the job done? And that's going to be war. And we need to be prepared for that. And he's also like, I'm not going to mince words with you. I'm going to be real with you. I'm going to tell you the truth. Of course, that's what he says. He's still going to hide things from them, things they don't need to know, because that's realpolitik. That's being realistic. That's Machiavelli, right? And he also, this rallies the German people. It's very successful. It gets them ready to go. So although Bismarck was an outstanding diplomat, the phrase blood and iron has become a popular description of his foreign policy, partly because he did it on occasion resort to war to further the unification of Germany, which we're going to talk about, and the expansion of his continental power. Therefore, he became known as the Iron Chancellor. Now, interesting thing to note is that in German it's actually iron and blood, and in the speech it was iron and blood, but we switch it in English because blood and iron sounds way more epic. So he's quoted saying, "The great questions of the day are not decided by speeches and majority votes, but by blood and iron." So in the actual speech in German it would have been iron and blood, but very epic speech. Very moving. I honestly can completely understand why it garnered such a strong reaction, because this does energize the people of Prussia to do what they're going to do. This speech is really the motivation. So maybe his quote's a little bit wrong. But, also not, because just the speech alone wouldn't have done anything, right? So now we have, leading up to really the heart of the German unification, and that is the wars that had to be fought in order to unify Germany. So if my face is covering this, it says the Schleswig-Holstein question, with a Danish king as the Duke of Holstein or Holstein. I like to say Holstein, but it's probably Holstein, so I'm going to say that. And the German rulers occupying Schleswig. It creates tension between the two, because you probably noticed that you have the German Confederation down here, Schleswig right here. They're divided by this area where people speak German, and they're very national, like the people of this area are very nationalistic in Germany's favor, but they're ruled by the King of Denmark, which is up here. So that's a problem with for Germany. And I think one sign that America is not at a dangerous level of nationalism is that us being separated from Alaska by Canada doesn't really bother us that much. It would be like if we were upset that Canada was in the way of Alaska, and so thus we sought to conquer Canada. That's kind of like essentially what's going on. So on the 15th of November in 1863, King Christian the Ninth becomes the King of Denmark and the Duke of Schleswig and Holstein. So that's just going to kind of tip Prussia and Austria over the edge. They're going to actually be on the same side this time. the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of a thing. So on the 18th of November, 3 days later, he signed a Danish November Constitution, which declared the Duchy, it's a real term, of Schleswig as a part of Denmark, meaning he's officially saying Schleswig is a part of Denmark, which it actually is in modern day geography. Austria and Prussia see this as a violation and a insult to who they are, and so they are going to declare a war. And so something you need to know for the test is that there are 3 wars that take place for the German unification, 3 major wars. And the first one is the Second Schleswig War. And I know that's confusing because you're going to have to remember the order of the 3 wars. And the first war is the Second Schleswig War. You're like, well, what about the First Schleswig War? Well, it wasn't really to deal with the German unification, so you don't need to know the First Schleswig War. I don't even know what the heck it really was about, to be honest with you, because it's not relevant to what we're talking about. So the first war for German unification is the Second Schleswig War. The Holstein population is mainly German-speaking and of German ancestry. Schleswig has a sizable Danish minority, but it is still mostly German. So fighting begins when Prussia and Austria crossed the border into Schleswig on February 1st, 1864. The Danes are honestly no match for the combined might of Austria and Prussia, and the Danish have no allies because Norway and Sweden and especially Finland, I don't even think Finland is a country at this point, they're not going to help their Scandinavian brothers. Denmark was a Viking nation. Like, these are the descendants of Vikings. And their Scandinavian brothers in Norway simply aren't going to help. They don't want to tick off the Prussians and the Austrians. So the Danish have no allies, and they have really no chance of fighting off Prussia and Austria, who really at this point, other than maybe England, are the strongest nations in Europe. So with there really being no match, it's a very quick victory. And they take both the territories of Holstein and Schleswig. The Treaty of Vienna is signed by the Danish on October 30th, 1864. It's a pretty quick war. Prussia would be responsible for Schleswig and Austria responsible for Holstein. But you might notice a problem there is that the way that's structured, Prussia is now separated from part of its territory, right? So if the, excuse me, let me go back. I'm having a brain fart. Prussians have Schleswig. Okay. So if the Prussians have this territory, where's my mouse? This territory in yellow, and the Austrians have this territory, and then Prussia's right here, you see that for Prussia, they really have the same exact problem that they had with the Danish. So this is going to sow the seeds for the second war in the unification of Germany. See, Bismarck is not happy with the outcome. However, so in 1865, he sends Prussian forces into Holstein. Again, and that's going to obviously tick off Austria. Austria, presiding over the German Confederation, a role acquired, half a century earlier at the Congress of Vienna, proposes that the Confederation should punish Prussia. So Prussia goes in and attacks this territory that it was agreed that Austria would have control over. And then Austria's like, how dare you? We're going to call the German Confederation and we are going to punish you. But again, this is why confederations don't work. Because the German Confederation, the assembly, really has no power. So Prussia is just going to say, well, we no longer recognize your authority. We're Prussia. What are you going to do about it? Make us stop. So Prussia, certain of being outvoted on the issue, responds on June 14th, 1866 by declaring that the Confederation, the German Confederation, is bogus. Now, I just want to bring up a map here a little bit back because it just puts things into perspective. So Austria down here is supposed to be controlling Holstein right there. that, I mean, look at the distance between this territory and where Austria is. I kind of understand why Prussia doesn't want an Austrian nation that close to Prussia, kind of sandwiching them and also cutting them off from Schleswig. So I get it. I understand why Prussia and Prussia aims to unify Germany without Austria. So I mean, I totally understand their thinking there. But whenever they do this, that is going to tick off the Austrians. Now, I do want to point out that this is normally I ask you guys, a question, but I can't because you're not here. Not that I would want you in my home, no offense, but it's not that big of a house. So this is a photograph, and this is really the first photograph other than the Japanese samurai pictures that is in the notes. That to say that we are officially in 1866, 1865, which is, American Civil War time. So if that helps put things into perspective about what's going on in America, it's about the American Civil War. And so photographs are emerging and cameras are emerging as a thing. So the road to the 7 Weeks War, which is our next war, it's also, I think, known as the... No, I don't want to misspeak, so I'm going to wait till it's on the slide. We're just going to... The 7 Weeks War is coming. So on June 15th, 1865, when Saxony, Hanover, and Hessen-Kassel, which are some of these smaller German states here, refused to give assurance that they will remain neutral if a war is declared between Austria and Prussia, Prussia then says, okay, well then we're just going to conquer you. Right? So Prussia basically asks Saxony, Hanover, and Hessen-Kassel, hey, will you support, will you remain neutral if we go to war with Austria? And they say, maybe, but we're not going to give you any assurances. And so Prussia's all right, well, we're just going to conquer you because that way we don't have to worry about it. So you can see the before and after here. The blue, the dark blue is Prussia before. This is Prussia after. And that's, that's Bismarck. The blood and iron, well, okay, we'll just conquer you. You made your choice. We were going to do it eventually anyway. And so now we get to the 7 Weeks War. And this is where Prussia is going to go to war with Austria and defeat them in 7 weeks, which is really super impressive. Prussia and Austria were supposed to be these equal powers, and now they're not. Now Prussia has proven that they are the dominant power indefinitely. They defeat Austria in 7 weeks. To defeat a nation as large as Austria that quickly had never been done before. Napoleon wasn't even able to do that. And so a big reason why that was possible is what I've been saying this whole class. Numbers are less important when compared to having the modern technology of the day and having the modern tactics. And Chapter 9, the textbook guide, which hopefully you have done by now, if you haven't noticed, was all about this thing called the Industrial Revolution. And that is... that is a huge modernization of society, and Prussia is one of the nations that has embraced the Industrial Revolution to its fullest extent. England would be another, and eventually America as well. But nations like France and Austria, which are very largely agricultural, very much so farming, they are a lot slower to embrace the Industrial Revolution. So while Austria is using old guns, like muzzle loading guns, like guns you'd see, they're still rifles, but you still muzzle load is where you have to put the bullet in through the top of the gun. Austrians are still using that. While Prussians have fully embraced the Industrial Revolution, they have something called a breech loading rifle, which you see depicted here, and it's much, much faster. And so just like with the English and the longbow versus the French with the crossbow, the breech loading rifle is much faster, so you can have more bullets in the air at a time, you know, so who's going to win? The people that are able to shoot 5 rounds per minute, or the person that's able to shoot 1 round per minute? You know, I think the advantage is obvious. The Prussians also have railroads because of the Industrial Revolution, and telegraphs. Telegraphs are like really old text messages, basically, usually done in Morse code, which is where, you know, it's like you've seen like Balto, where it's like a bunch of taps, right? And so the railroad allows Prussia to get their troops to the front line much quicker, which gives them more time to set up the battlefield. If they need reinforcements or more supplies, it's able to get there much quicker. Telegraphs, you can communicate with the generals about what's going on the battlefield much quicker. You don't have to send somebody to walk there necessarily. And so this allows Prussia to kind of be like a lightning bolt, like bam, 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 bam. And so by the time the Austrians realize what has happened, it's too late. Having the modern technology, having the better communication, having the better guns allows Prussia to defeat this world power in a matter of 7 weeks. Now, to kind of illustrate the significance of this, I have a series of videos to explain the difference. All right? So first we're going to watch a muzzle loading rifle. All right? And the thing is, this is basically what the... we don't need video. We don't need audio on this. This is basically what the Austrians would be using. And I know that these two are really cheesy, but it shows you what... This is what the Austrians would be using. Now theirs would be a rifle, and he's using a musket. A musket is just a metal tube. It's inside of the barrel, it's just a metal tube. Now what makes a rifle is that it has almost like a screw. His teeth are nasty. It almost has like a screw-like pattern on inside of the gun, so that whenever the bullet or lead ball is ignited with the combustion, like the ignition of gunpowder, and it launches that lead ball or bullet down the barrel, the screw, like spiraling, spins the bullet. And if you're looking at a lead ball, it actually morphs the lead ball to actually have some of the grooves in it. And that makes it much more accurate. You're like, why would you do that? Well, if you're just shooting it out of a metal tube, the bullet can really go anywhere. But if you create that inertia, that circular motion, it actually makes it much more accurate. So that's what the difference is between a musket and a rifle, right? So what you just saw there was him, you know, that was a long process, about a minute to load that gun. And, you know, you could move quicker, but still, you're going to notice that it really doesn't compare to the breech loading rifle, which we're going to watch now. Now, I'm going to skip part of this video because, weirdly enough, he does screw it up. Well, actually, that is not the correct video. He does actually screw it up quite a few times. Now, this form of shooting a gun is still not as fast as a modern day gun, but it is much, much better. No. I want to make sure that I get the one where he actually gets it right. So with this form of gun, you'd probably have these pre-made, but you still have the shell, and then you put the lead ball on top. So you see the gunpowder in there. The hammer hitting the back of that shell is what ignites the gunpowder. You know, there's a special, I think it's like flint or something like that. I don't know the specifics of it. And it hits that, and that explosion, that gunpowder explosion, launches the ball. Well, let's watch that again. Okay, so all he's got to do is put it back there and close the latch, point and shoot. You know, you take out the little shell, you put in a little bit of gunpowder, you put the bullet in there, you put it back, bam. It is much, much quicker. whenever this guy gets it right, it really takes him 10 seconds, to get this thing to fire. So the breech loading rifle is much, much quicker and also a lot safer. A lot of times people would be so nervous with muzzle loading rifles that they just keep loading. So they'd have like 6 bullets and they never actually even fired the gun during the battle. So this is much easier. It's still slower than a modern gun, but this is a huge, huge step in gun technology. And that to say that once the Industrial Revolution kicks off, you see guns evolve very quickly. So, guns were first invented at the end of the medieval age with the cannons. And you see an evolution with guns, but it's very slow. Like it takes, the musket, what would largely use the American Revolution, really isn't that much more sophisticated. A rifle is pretty sophisticated, but the fact that we're just now getting to a breech loading rifle after, hundreds of years, that's pretty slow. But after the Industrial Revolution, guns get really, really good. The breech loading rifle is made during, this time period of the late 1800s. And by 1910, you have fully automatic machine guns, which you can see depicted right here. That's impressive. Fully automatic machine guns, where it took like really hundreds of years to make a breech loading rifle. Once we get to the Industrial Revolution, guns evolve very quickly. Just think it's 2020. It's been, it took, like the guns today, there is less distance between the guns today and the breech loading rifle than the guns in the medieval age and the musket. Like, guns evolved much, much quicker after the Industrial Revolution. Now, the next thing that comes up is a bolt action rifle, which is where you pull it back and cock it that way, right? So that's kind of what you would see in like World War I with the average foot soldier. They don't have like submachine guns in World War I. I think this is our World War II gun. So this is what you would see somebody fighting with in the average soldier in World War I. This is a bolt action rifle. So this is where guns are in World War I for the average soldier. They have machine guns, but they are, they're very big. This is what your average soldier would have. So you can see every time he shoots, he has to do that. Now you can still load a magazine, which is what holds your bullets, usually through the top. And that is much faster. You don't have to load every time you want to fire a bullet. So it is much better than the breech loading rifle, and that is what, by 1910, that is really the gun for the average soldier. And then by World War II, you have semi-automatic rifles in the hands of average soldiers. And there even is a gun in World War II, a submachine gun, which is a fully automatic rifle that you can hold in your hands. That's what a submachine gun is. But the average World War II soldier, U.S. soldier, would be firing this gun. And if you watch Band of Brothers, that's what you'll see. So you just, every time you pull the trigger, a bullet comes out. That's what semi-automatic means. So a AR-15, that gun that's always in the news, that is a semi-automatic gun, meaning it is like this gun, where you pull the trigger once and one bullet comes out, and that's what it does. Now this gun has a lot of power to it, but that to say, ultimately an AR-15 is not that much more dangerous. It just looks more dangerous, so people freak out about it. So to show you what a fully automatic gun looks like, to tell you the difference between a semi-automatic and a fully automatic gun. This video is of a pistol that is a fully automatic gun, right? So this is what CNN thinks an AR-15 can do. But what he's actually doing right here, I'm assuming that he has a special license, because for the average US citizen, this gun would be illegal. Having a fully automatic rifle in the United States, not being ex-military, is illegal. Like, I could not own this gun legally, and neither could you. But a semi-automatic rifle, so you see he just holds down the trigger and it just goes out like, you know, it's like a machine gun. That is what CNN and NBC think an AR-15 is, but it is actually not that at all. It is a semi-automatic, just like the World War II rifle, it just holds more bullets. So this one down here looks very dangerous, but it's just because it looks that way. But you just pull the trigger down once, it shoots one bullet. A fully automatic gun is not legal in the United States unless you have like special permission. But that's the news media. They know almost nothing about guns. But my point being, the Austrians are using the first gun we looked at, and the Prussians are using the second gun we looked at, and that's going to give them a significant advantage. The other guns are just to kind of show you how really in a very short period of time, really less than 100 years, we have fully automatic rifles, fully automatic guns. Now, this is probably blocked here by my face, but it says lightning war, quick warfare that relies on speed of execution, evolves over time. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Because Prussia has railroads, because they're able to, you know, just, it's like a lightning bolt, like boom. Before the Austrians even know what's going on, it's too late. Because they have the railroads, because they have quicker, you know, guns, that gives them the advantage. And blitzkrieg is actually the name for the warfare that the Prussians are going to use for quite a while. Like whenever in World War II, the reason why Germany was able to conquer France so quickly was because they were using a form of blitzkrieg, an evolved form of blitzkrieg, where it was like airplanes with Luftwaffe, artillery shells, tanks, soldiers, you know, like just bam, 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 bam. So that by the time the French knew what was going on, it was too late. So that's blitzkrieg, it's lightning war. So Prussia invades Bohemia. By July, the Prussians have made it to Vienna, which is the capital of Austria, and the Austrians are going to surrender. The defeated Austrians sign an armistice, which is basically the peace agreement until the treaty is made. So when somebody surrenders, it's armistice until an official treaty is signed. With Prussia on July 22nd, thus ending the war, ceasefire. Austria will never win another war as of today, ever again. Meanwhile, other Prussian armies have been winning as well. Victories are racked up against Hanover in the west and against Bavaria and other smaller German states. So Prussia is slowly unifying Germany, and they've just proven that they are stronger than Austria and that they are unquestionably the most powerful German nation. All right, so this is going to guarantee that Klein Deutschland is what's going to take place. And I'm about to close up for the day, and I'm going to finish the German unification tomorrow. The Kingdom of Italy participated in this war as well. They're kind of like they were fighting Austria at the same time as Prussia, so kind of like almost as a little reward for like a participation trophy. Prussia gives Italy the territory that they were fighting for during this war, which I'll talk about during the Italian unification as well. With the Treaty of Prague, which is what the treaty to end the 7 Weeks' War is called, signed on the 23rd of 1866, Bismarck demonstrates conclusively the leadership of the German world now passes from Austria to Prussia officially, and Klein Deutschland will be the key. This is where I'm going to leave off here. This really leaves only one country left in Europe to challenge them, because England's not going to... England's not that concerned with Prussia. They're on their own little island. So the next challenger and what we're going to talk about tomorrow is the Franco-Prussian War, which is France versus Prussia. And it is a war that has started literally because France's feelings got hurt. Of course, Bismarck planned that, but, point is, it is what it is. So tomorrow we're going to look at that, probably actually get into the Italian unification as well. This notes went on a little bit longer than I thought, but is what it is. So I'll see you tomorrow. I'll probably keep the discussion questions limited to 2 again, just because today's is a bit longer. I don't want to overload you guys with work. But just think, 50 minutes is still like 30, 40 minutes less than your average class period. So we're still sitting pretty. Have a wonderful day. See you guys tomorrow to finish the German unification and maybe start the Italian unification. I might just do German unification tomorrow so you have time to do the blood and iron worksheet. And then do the Italian unification on its own day. Then we'll review and take the test. The test is super short and it's super easy. To be honest with you, students don't usually struggle very hard with this. I actually wrote this test for people that have a hard time speaking English. But you do need to know the 3 wars for the German unification. You need to know Klein Deutschland and Gross Deutschland, and you need to know Bismarck, the year 1848. It's a very short test. It's really I think 30 something questions. And then we'll get into World War I, which is a pretty beefy unit. But yeah, have a great day. See you tomorrow. Peace out.